Hello, everyone. Thank you for joining our webinar, Director's Talk, Memories of Origin, Hiroshi Sugimoto. My name is Yuko Kaifu, and I'm the president of Japan House Los Angeles. We're so excited to present today's fireside chat with Scarlet Cheng and director Yuko Nakamura, who'll be discussing the documentary film, Memories of Origin, Hiroshi Sugimoto, which director Nakamura worked on. Today's program is related to our new exhibition, Windology, Architectural Views from Japan. While our gallery is temporarily closed, a virtual tour of the exhibition is available on the Japan House, Los Angeles, LA. As you might have noticed that my virtual background is actually how the exhibition is set up. So hopefully we'll be able to open our gallery on site sometime in near future. The exhibition actually focuses on the function and meaning of windows from architectural and cultural perspectives. In the current pandemic, windows play even more important functions as they not only separate indoors and outdoors, but also connect you to the outside world as you spend much more time indoors. I hope you have a chance to visit our virtual gallery tour of this new exhibition. Now, I'd like to introduce our speakers. This fireside chat will be moderated by Scarlet Cheng. Scarlet is an art and film educator, critic, and writer based in Los Angeles, and is a regular contributor to the Los Angeles Times, the art newspaper, and Artillery Art magazine. She also teaches art and film history at Art Center College of Design and Altis College of Art and Design. Yuko Nakamura is an award-winning film director who created this documentary. Memories of Origin, Hiroshi Sugimoto, is the one that we'll be discussing today, which was nominated for the 39th International Emmy Awards. She spent over 200 days following Mr. Sugimoto, a renowned photographer and contemporary artist, to shoot the film. Yuko Nakamura is based in Tokyo, works with the company TV Man Union as a producer and director. So she's participating today from Tokyo. Scarlet and Yuko will discuss the film and the art of Hiroshi Sugimoto. If you have not seen the film itself, it will be available to stream through Japan House LA's website and the portal that you registered for today's talk until December the 2nd. I will now pass it on to Scarlet Cheng and Yuko Nakamura. So the screen is yours.
Thank you so much. Of course, I want to say thank you to Japan House and to Yuko Kaifu for this wonderful program and all the people who, there are many people who made it possible. Actually, I'm so impressed with the production of this event through Japan House. And of course, the Windology exhibition, although it can't be viewed in person, I believe there is a virtual walkthrough at Japan House, so you can enjoy it that way. It's a wonderful introduction to our subject matter, this documentary about Hiroshi Sugimoto, whose point of view is very strong, but quiet. And I think it took a documentary like this, like the one that Nakamura-san has made, to convey a very distinct point of view, but quiet, and it doesn't always get conveyed very easily. So it's wonderful to see this documentary, which is a little over 80 minutes. Please, it will be available. Please do so if you haven't yet. It's available through Japan House LA until, I believe, December the 2nd. We've been introduced to myself and Nakamura-san. So I'll talk a little bit about the film and show some images from the film. This is a beautifully shot film, for one thing, and beautifully thought through. So let me share my screen. Memories of Origin. Actually, while we watch the film, we learn more and more why that title. And I love the fact that this film sort of starts with the sea, images of the sea, and ends with a sea. And we find out why towards the end. Not only is the sea one of the subjects of Sugimoto's photographic series, it's also a very early memory, his earliest memory, as he tells us at the end. Here's a picture of the artist in case you haven't seen the film yet or not sure what he looks like. And I love the fact that the film, the documentary, takes us into his studio and lab very early on. And we see him experimenting with one of his series, which is the lightning series. So he creates electrical shocks directly onto negatives and process them. And here he is experimenting with some of the equipment he uses, and he produces amazing images. This is the unseen electrical shocks, waves with different materials. I'll just show a few pictures, really unexpected. And at the end, he refers to the birth of life itself could have been, you know, through this kind of process. I also love the fact that Nakamura-san shows us not only his process, but gives us a little insight, background into his daily life. And this is what he eats virtually every day. He makes it himself, his bento box. And then I'm going to talk just about a few of his series. The earliest one, when he became a professional photographer, or was trying to become a professional photographer, is a diorama series. He went to the Museum of Natural History in New York City and started photographing the dioramas there. Now, it seems like a strange thing to do, but he wanted to call into question the nature of reality. Some people see these dioramas and they feel they've seen reality, but as a matter of fact, they're kind of a fake reality or a made-up reality. And this series actually was the first series that he did as a professional photographer, and also managed to sell to the Museum of Modern Art, MoMA, in New York, which I think many of you know is probably one of the leading museums of contemporary art in the world. So that began his career as a professional photographer. He then followed, there are many things that he did, but he followed, these are some of the more famous series he's done. The theater series, where he went inside a movie theater and opened the exposure of his camera throughout the length of a film, so about 90 minutes to an hour. And the very light of the film itself illuminated the theater. These are just some of the theaters he went to. Of course, these are older ones, beautiful, you know, early 1900s Art Deco theaters. And he even went to, this is a drive-in. I love the fact that he even went to a drive-in. The Sea series, he has a series of the sea. And here he is with some of his people in his studio talking about a print. And some of it came together, some of these thoughts came together. And this is a piece from 5 Elements, which involves 3-dimensional objects as well as a projection of the sea. You look at the sea, the projection of the sea through one of these small objects. Actually, they're not that big. They had it installed at the Asian Art Museum in San Francisco, and I've seen it a number of times. It's one of my favorite works of art. Nakamura-san also takes you to, follows him for 200 days, maybe not for all of 200 days, but for some of it. He goes to France, where he looks to photograph an aqueduct there in the south of France. And here he uses a classic 8x10 with actual film. And here's the result. He put it at infinity, kind of depth of field infinity. So it looks murky and out of focus, but that's what he intended. This is not a mistake. I loved seeing sort of the culmination of a lot of this work, because these are some of the works from the Lightning series here on the sides. This is an old electric power plant in Sydney, where he was invited to make a presentation at the Sydney Art Biennial in 2010. He called it Faraday Cage. So there's a walk going up surrounded by these lightning photographs. And at the top here, he put the thunder god. This is a Kamakura period sculpture with another photograph of his behind. So here he melds traditional Japanese art ancient Japanese art with a very contemporary photograph. And Nakamura-san also covers a little bit of his growing up, so we know his background. Here he is as a child. He grew up in Tokyo. And later, he came to Los Angeles, actually, to study at Art Center here in Pasadena. And here he is as a youth, jumping up in front of, I guess, some of his colleagues, maybe. So he came here, did an advanced degree in photography, and then went to New York and started his professional career. And have some questions for Nakamura-san. Nakamura-san, perhaps you could tell us first how you began to make documentaries. You know, what brought you to this form?
First thing for me was just that I really loved films. And I wanted to learn how to make films, but I was studying philosophy at the time in college. And I made a lot of 8mm films on the side. And then I began to work as an editor at a publishing house. But I couldn't forget the feeling of wanting to become a filmmaker. And so I started assisting a well-known director. And there I started to learn more about filmmaking and moved on. And at TV Man Union, which was my next step, I worked with well-known director Koreda Hirokazu, and by assisting him, I was able to learn a lot about filmmaking, and that kind of became the next step for me as a filmmaker.
You know, this is really a very special documentary. It's beautifully made. It also, you put a lot of time and energy into making it, clearly. How did you, I mean, were you interested in Sugimoto before you made this film? And what interested you about him as an artist?
With Mr. Sugimoto's photographs, I was following for a very long time before I made this film. And you know, being a photographer means, you know, pursuing what is really important about, you know, the style of the photographs. So photographers, you know, I thought was all about capturing reality and how do people capture reality. But his whole perspective on photography is very different. So he would question whether, you know, is photography really about just that one moment? No one, he felt that no one was really doing this with photography. They were really just focusing on capturing moments instead of envisioning something and going out and capturing that.
And you know, there's a really great story about how you actually got to finally meet him and do a documentary. How did you manage to arrange that? Because you know, to follow an artist for that many days is really quite a feat. I mean, most documentaries about artists I've seen, people follow him, the artist, him or her, maybe for at most a week or maybe a couple of weeks, but 200 days is a long time. So how did you manage to do that?
I didn't think that I was going to be able to shoot for such a long time. And he also I don't think he thought he was going to be followed for so long.
頼んだ時には普通にこう、ギャラリーに所属しているので、そのギャラリーに訪ねていって、最初は担当キュレーターの方と話していたんですね。
And at first I was just traveling and going to his gallery to
それで
ask for permission to film with Mr. Sugimoto. And he just happened to arrive at the gallery where I was speaking with his curator, and he had just made some very large purchases of antiques.
っていうような形で私と一緒に会話をし始めて、なんとその最初のファーストミーティングで2時間ぐらい杉本さんともありと
And so in that first meeting, I spoke for about 2 hours with Mr. Sugimoto, all about his philosophy, his photographs, all of that sort of thing.
で日本のドキュメンタリーには出たことないけれども、君がこうやって僕とずっとこう会話をして撮ってくれるんだったら、
He said to me, I've never been in any of your documentaries, but if this documentary is about us having this relationship and you just speaking to me like this, then I would be interested in doing it.
としては現場には行かないつもりだった。プロデューサーとしてやるつもりだったんだけれども、そう言われてしまったので分かりましたと。So, 両方自分でやるっていう形で。
I was only planning on being a producer on this film, but he asked me to sort of be more in that director role. So I decided to take him up on it and be producer and director.
家族ぐるみで仲良くなっていって、で、だから最初は
And so we really became almost like family.
つもりでした。私も多分杉本さんも。だけれどもなんかカメラが回ってないところでもものすごくたくさん食事をしたし、
and you know, even when the camera wasn't rolling,
言われて、なんかどんどん長くなって、結局フランスに一緒に行きましょう。シドニーに行くと一緒に行きましょう。で、なんか
speaking about the content of his art pieces and the philosophy, and he started inviting me to Sydney and to have these experiences with him. And so that's how that went.
You know, to me, this film, it required quite a bit of trust. So I think there must have been something in your meeting when you first met him. He started to trust you as, you know, someone who is going to record so much of his life and process. I actually congratulate you for impressing him so much on that first meeting. I didn't ask you before, but how long did it take to edit the film? Because it's so well edited. It sort of takes you on a journey, and you know, you start in the present, and then you go to the past, and then you go to the far past, and then you come back to the present again. How long did it take you to edit the film?
最初にこれは実はWOWOWのテレビで
In the beginning,
なんですけれども、その53分ぐらいのバージョンは
this was just supposed to be a TV project for WOWOW.
で、映画
And it was about 2 months.
スタートにやはり素材がたくさんあるし、これはきっとロングバージョン映画にもなり得ると思って、で、いろいろ動いた結果映画にして公開することができるっていうふうになって、で編集するようになってからは、1年ですね。ちょうどその時に311の、地震と津波が起こって、それってものすごくこの私たち、私の気持ちも変化したし、きっと観客の気持ちも変化するだろうと思って、少し編集を変えたりして、それで1年ぐらいの時間をかけて映画バージョン、皆さんにご覧いただく映画バージョンは1年ぐらいの時間をかけて編集しました。
So I'm kind of switching to interpreting after her because the simultaneous function isn't going super well. But what she said is that it took about 2 months to create the TV edit, and that was a shorter cut. That was for WOWOW, but I felt that it was somehow incomplete still. So I decided to create a much longer version, and that was actually influenced in post-production because the Great Japan earthquake and tsunami happened during that time. So that kind of influenced my outlook a little bit on what I wanted to include. And so that also added to part of it. And I completed it in about a year is how long it took.
Actually, that's interesting. How did the earthquake affect your view of what you wanted to say in the film? How did was it the Kanto earthquake?
特にシドニー・ビエンナーレなんですけれども、あそこがまあ電気プラントの中で行われた、さっきスカーレットさんがすごく素晴らしく紹介してくださったように、電気プラントの中での展示だったので、非常にこう人間にとって電気とは何か、エネルギーとは何かで、まあ、それが結局原子力につながってるわけですけれども、311の後にやっぱり原子力が爆発した、ただ地震津波だけじゃなくて原子力が爆発したっていうところにやっぱり非常に思い致すところが大きくて、それでシドニー・ビレンナーレで杉本さんがかなり文明論を語っていて、私と随分長いやり取りがあったんですね。でそこがあまり映画バージョン編集している時も入っていなかったんですけれども、やっぱり311を経て爆発を目撃した私たちがこの映画を見るにあたっては、きっと文明論が刺さるはずだと思って、そのシドニーの場面を少し長く編集したりしました。
So during the Sydney Biennale, which was that Faraday cage bit that you so well introduced, Scarlet, that part was influenced because we were talking a lot about sort of the philosophical idea of electricity. And of course, one form of generating electricity is nuclear power. And the nuclear power plant in Japan exploded in the 3/11 natural disaster. And so him and I spoke a lot about that off camera and on camera. And so I decided that that was another important part to include in the film. And so that was part of what kind of made that scene a little bigger and a little fuller.
One of the, I think, wonderful ways you framed the film, you know, from the beginning and the end was the sea. And at the beginning, we're not quite, I mean, of course, he has a series called The Sea, so it's very much part of his work. So you begin with images of the sea. You talk about the 5 elements, which has photographs of the sea projected. And then you end with images of the sea. And then, as I said before, at the end, you find out Sugimoto says that his first memory is of the sea when he was about 4 or 5. Did you see this framing right away, or was it through editing that you found the framing?
撮り始めと撮ってる時は、この杉本さんのこの映画を作るにあたって海ってものでこう杉本さんの人生をフレーミングするっていうふうには思ってなかったです。でなぜなら最後に小田原で最後に杉本さんが言う僕の最初の記憶が海のパッパッと見える車窓からの海だったっていうのは、もう今日これで200日最後、杉本さんこれでもう撮影最後にしましょうと、もうラストデイですって言って小田原のこれからここに僕が一大作品を展示する場所を作るんだよっていうところに連れてってくれた撮影の日がもう最後の撮影だったんですね。もうお互いそれ決めていて、それでそこで僕の始まりの記憶がっていうふうに話してくれたので、もうその言葉を聞いて、この映画は杉本さんの記憶をたどる、杉本さんの記憶をたどることで、ある種人類の記憶をたどったり、アートの記憶をたどったりする、彼を一つのよりしろとして、私たちがそこに何か記憶をたどる装置のようなものとして杉本さんを見ることもできるっていう映画になるだろうっていうふうに、だから最後の日ですね、言葉を取った時にそのフレーミングができた。
When we first started filming, the ocean was not sort of that frame, quote unquote, that I thought the entire film was going to be told through at all. But when we were shooting in Odawara, we were on basically our 200th day. And he had said, let's make this our last day. And he was talking about this massive exhibit and this big dream of his that he was going to create this whole exhibit in Odawara. And we both had agreed that that was going to be the last day of filming. And that's when he shared with me his first memory, the oldest memory that he had. And so by going through that moment and being so touched by it, I felt that that was going to be exactly what we sort of frame the film with. This is going to be a film about going through his memories to get glimpses of his artwork. And that's going to be sort of the through line. is sort of like going back and retracing a lot of his memories. So that's when that whole idea of framing it with the ocean and with his memories came up.
I think it's really, really good documentaries are about seizing the moment, grabbing the moment, and seeing what becomes available to you, you know, and that's clearly what you did. And it really is a great device. And at the end, you're almost a little surprised, you know, when he talks about his first memory, because he's a little shy. So he doesn't talk a lot about himself per se. And then he talks about his first memory. One of my favorite sections, which is early on, is when he's doing the lightning photographs, you know, with the experiments with different things. And it's very interesting that he still enjoys experimenting a lot, because I think of him as a very controlled photographer, like he controls everything. But here he lets a little accident happen. Was it difficult to shoot that section because he's in the dark sometimes and you're not quite sure what he's going to produce with that lightning rod he has? Was it?
あれは本当に科学の実験で中高生たちが使う電気を起こす雷みたいな放電を起こす機械なんですけれども、あれがニューヨークの彼のスタジオにあって、で撮影に関しては確かに暗いところでバチッとするのは難しいんですが、ただ明るいところでバチバチやってもらって、そこにフォーカス合わせて電気を消してカメラ位置変えなければそんなに撮影技術としては難しくないっていうのも、ほぼこの映画の撮影は、カメラマンと私2人ですね、ずっと2人で撮っていて、で先ほどもちょっとスカーレットさん紹介してくださった日本のお家での場面とか、アンティークを買う位置ですね、朝市の場面とか、ああいうところは私が1人で自分でカメラを持って撮ってもいるので、本当に小規模のクルーで撮ってるし、そこまで何か難しい技術は全然使っていないんです。
It was the device that he uses to sort of discharge that charge of electricity is basically the exact same thing that students use in like science experiments and that sort of thing. And he has one in his New York studio, and you know, it was kind of tricky to shoot in the dark, but at the same time, there wasn't that much complexity involved because it's just a instant flash of light. So we just went in and filmed, and normally it was just two of us, myself and my camera person, shooting together. And so even all of the stuff like the first thing in the morning, or him eating and that sort of thing, like I also shot some of that type of stuff myself. And so that was kind of the process. It wasn't so difficult to shoot in the dark for that one.
Yes, I was going to ask you how many people you were on your crew, and you just answered it's a cameraman and yourself, right? Most of the time, because you know some of the scenes where he's talking, he's quite open and he's very relaxed. So I was wondering whether you only had one person or two persons, but and sometimes you shot yourself. You know how to work the camera. Oh, okay, yeah. So you captured many moments that are actually relatively intimate, you know, where he's talking or walking somewhere and just sharing his thoughts with you. I thought that, I mean, there are many things to say about his work, but we look at some of his philosophy of art and life. He's a very thoughtful person, seems to be constantly exploring new ideas and forms. What was the most surprising thing for you that you learned about him during this time? That was a surprise to you. By the way, to me, what was a surprise was that I didn't know he was an antiques dealer. Like early in his career, he actually, you know, bought and sold antiques. And towards the end of the film, you show him walking through an antique fair in Japan. So that surprised me. I knew he would be interested in old sculpture and objects, but I didn't know he actually was a dealer in antiques.
そう、私もそこは一番あれ撮ってて楽しかったところですね。で、今スカーレットさんが言われて思い出したのは、彼すごくお料理もね、上手で、お弁当も上手だし、ほとんどこう板前さんのように本当にこういう格好をして、割烹杉本って言って家でお料理を作ってお客さんに振る舞ってるんですが、私も招かれた時に茹でた枝豆が出てきて、で、すごいこう石の器に入ったんですね。 でこれすごい石の器ですねって言ったら、これ縄文時代の土器だと。って言われて、で昨日お風呂に一緒に入ってきれいにしといたから大丈夫だよって言われて、で触ってもいいしよく味わってって言われて、でも縄文時代のできっと縄文時代の人たちはこうやって食べてたからっていうふうに出されて、でその時になんかすごくやっぱり縄文時代の器で枝豆を食べて、その古いものが持ってる本当に確かに縄文の人たちもこうやって使ってたとかもしれないっていうのを8ですね。こうやって杉本さんは本当に古い時代の人たちのものの考え方とか世界の見方とかこう感覚、世界をどういうふうに感じ取ってきたかとかっていうものを古物を実際に触ることによって感じてきたんだな。でそれがアーティストとしてのすごく連綿と続く何千年の歴史をそう背負ってアーティストでいるっていうそのやっぱ文明史観も大きいし、そういうものの源泉なんだなってことを発見したんですよね。それはすごく驚いたことの一つ、今スカレさんに言われて思い出しました。
So I also actually had most fun shooting a lot of the parts that you're talking about, where he's showing us his antiques and that sort of thing. And I didn't know a lot about that aspect of him. You know, he's also this really incredible cook, right? He gets dressed up and he serves customers. He has the whole sign, you know, in front of his house, and you know, he invites his friends and serves them as if he's in a restaurant. And he invited me as well, and he served some edamame, some boiled edamame in a rock bowl. And I mentioned that, wow, this is a really nice rock bowl, and he said, oh yeah, this is from the Jomon period.
Wow.
And so he said, but don't worry, like it took a bath yesterday, it's fine, it's clean. And so just really feel it with your hands and get to know it, and you know, get a sense of it, because you know, that's what this is all about. And then I was thinking to myself, wow, like this bowl was used, you know, thousands of years ago, and you know, many people may have done exactly that with that bowl. And so he sees the world and he sees people sort of through this lens of experiencing them through kind of touching, literally touching history and sort of sensing history in a very visceral way. And so you know, he's sort of an artist that has thousands of years of history behind him, because he's really felt that. And that was a really unique discovery, I think, that I made through the filming of the documentary.
All right. I'll show some pictures now, because that's a wonderful segue into talking about his interest in sort of traditional Japan. We think of him as a contemporary artist, a conceptual artist. He is actually very grounded in, I don't know, for lack of a better word, old Japan or traditional Japan. I'm not saying he's necessarily very traditional himself, but he has a very traditional core, you know. So let me show some pictures from the film in which he goes to an antique market. I love these sections. So there's a section that you show where he goes to an antique market. Where is this, by the way? Is this Tokyo or somewhere else? Do you remember, Nakamura-san?
Yeah, Yasukuni Jinja.
Oh, okay. All right. I think I've been there myself. It's a wonderful one. So he Yushion browsing, and he finds different things. Here he found a small book. I think it was the will left behind by an officer during World War II, perhaps. Very interesting. He's doing some research into why Japan participated in the war. I thought that was really, that also surprised me too. He's so interested in kind of eternal themes, but this one is very specific. Oh, here, there's a quote from him: you get a sense of that reality directly from objects. He feels that if you touch things, you know, see them with your own eyes and touch things, you get a better understanding of them. So he's interested in material culture. So this is the will. And then later there's a medal that he finds that he's been collecting. And then he himself, so this part is intriguing. He is sort of going back into traditional Japanese culture. Here he is practicing calligraphy. Here's the temple on Naoshima, which he helped rebuild in his own way. And there's in the middle there's a glass staircase. And then I think behind Nakamura-san, is this behind, there's a entry to another passageway that goes down. It's interesting because one staircase goes up, one staircase goes down, and it's a kind of, and the temple is in between. You know, the temple is sort of the intermediary, you know, between heaven and earth in a way. And I love the way you presented this particular sequence, because it's as if we were discovering it. You know, you don't say too much, you just follow him and he talks. And then he's also interested in no theater, and he went to visit many no theaters in Japan in order to build his own an art center in Odawara. Here he is. Oh, here he talks about when he was about 4 or 5. He remembers his first memory was of the sea. I was curious, do you have any insight as to why no theater? Why was he so interested in no theater? Because it's an older form of theater, older than kabuki, and not a lot of people are into no these days. But why do you think he was so interested in no? I mean, as a matter of fact, he was writing a script, right? In your film, he was actually in the process of writing a script.
多分能っていうのが日本の文化の中でも歌舞伎とかそういうものに比べてもその死者との対話だからだと思うんですね。能っていうのは能っていうのは基本的にはその旅する人が現れて、その旅する人にこう鬼とか死後の世界からこう幽霊だったり亡霊だったり鬼のような、異界の者たちが橋を渡ってやってきて、こう問わず語りを旅人に自分の過去の物語、恨みであったりとか、その解消しきれない現世での思いっていうものを語るっていうような構造を持ってるんですけれども、このやっぱりこう死者とか異界との対話っていうところが、その杉本さんの多分アーティストとしての興味を引いてるんだと思うんですね。で、さっきスカーレットさんが神社で、地下に下るところとっていう面白いっておっしゃってたんですけれども、やっぱり杉本さんの作品って常にそうで、死と生の境界であったりとか、その地上の世界と地下の世界であったりとか、文明の根源を通ってるからそれは必然的にそうなるんだと思うんですけれども、この現実のリアルな世界っていうものともう一つ別の世界、それが異界であったり死者の世界であったり、もっと別のものかもしれないけれども、そのこうリアリティと別の世界っていうものの王冠、対話や行き来ですねっていうものが杉本さんのアーティストとしての本懐だと思うので、能は多分その神社を作る上でも何でも同じなんですけれども、その異界との対話という意味で興味を引いてるんだと私は思います。
So no is a lot of no, even compared to kabuki and the other art forms, is really about talking sort of with the dead and sort of a conversation that happens with the dead. So typically there's some sort of traveler character who is on this journey, and then there's like a oni, like a devil or some sort of ghost or some sort of ghoul, you know, some sort of character that comes in and has some sort of interaction with the traveler. And there's these sort of past stories that comes up with the main character of sort of like these curses or this sort of unprocessed parts of their lives that are still coming up. And that conversation between the living and the dead, just like you mentioned, that glass staircase that goes down, it's really interesting. I think the contrast between that life and death, or the lower world and the upper world, that sort of thing, which you can also kind of, when you're looking at, you know, the actual structure of the stairs, you know, we live in this civilization, and that's kind of a necessary structure that we need for our lifestyles. But it's also this interesting thing about the spirit realm and sort of this back and forth that happens between the, you know, the real world, or quote unquote reality as we experience it, and then the supernatural sort of spiritual world as well. And I think for Sugimoto, and this is just my opinion, but I think that he had this feeling that that conversation takes place a lot in no. So I think that's what he found interesting.
I think that's true, actually. because I've actually been to some performances of No in Japan, and you feel suspended. Actually, the whole experience of going to No is you feel suspended in this other world, you know, between the living and the non-living, maybe, you know, and it's an amazing experience if you let yourself enter it, you know, fully. So, yeah. So I think we're at the time to have a few questions, if that's okay. There's a question about when you make documentaries, how do you set the distance between the target person and you, the camera? I think this is an interesting question. How do you figure out the distance? You know, because you could get really close to someone or you could be a little bit farther. Do you think about that when you set up the camera when you're shooting the different scenes? It's about distance, you know, how do you figure that out, or do you just feel it?
やっぱり対話だと思うんですよね。ドキュメンタリーを撮るっていうことも。私はかなり言葉とのやり取りが大きいと思っていて、心がけているのは質問をただするんじゃなくて、自分が世界をどう見てるか、その撮る対象の人の作品だったり考えだったり活動だったり、それをどういうふうに私は自分の世界の中で位置づけてるか、どう見えるかということをとにかく自分のこともきちんと話す、分かってもらう。そうするとあちらも自分がどういう世界の中でこうカメラの前で求められているのかも分かるし、ある種のこう共犯関係が出来上がっていくっていうところもあって、やっぱり対話だと思っていて、そこでやっぱり距離を近づいたり離れる人もいるんですけれども、でもそこに距離が適切な距離が生まれるっていうふうに思ってますね。
So it's really, for me, it's kind of a conversation between myself and the subject, and an interaction. And I think the words are actually very, very important. And so a thing I keep in mind is that I don't just ask questions. I make sure to, you know, to really feel and sort of define in my own way, how does this person see the world? I feel that I have to, you know, my job is to interpret that. And so I actually speak a lot about myself as well and how I see the world, so that it becomes this sort of relatable back and forth conversation. And that way we have this relationship and can relate on a deeper level. And some people prefer to create a little bit more distance as a filmmaker. But for me, that's where I start. And then the actual physical distance sort of just naturally follows.
Dialogue.
Yeah. There's a question here. I think I know the answer to it, but I'll ask it. At the end of the film, the camera goes through a tunnel and looks out to the sea. It ends up to the sea. By the way, is that the same tunnel? He goes down the glass staircase and then comes out to look at the sea. Is that the same tunnel? Yes? Okay. So the question is, was the tunnel with windows, because Sugimoto talks about a tunnel with windows, was it that tunnel or the one from his early memories? I don't know. I think the tunnel you're talking about is he remembers that when he took the train, there was a series of windows that he passed.
直島の神社は違うんですけれども、小田原のここに能舞台ができるって言って杉本さんが指をさした海はまさに4歳とか5歳の時に電車の中から見たもうジャストな海、水平線なんですね。でその記憶、小田原にだから作ったのは本当に杉本さんとしては自分の最後の仕事というくらい、まさに自分が見た海の場所に能舞台を作るっていうのが彼の仕事だけれども、多分直島にしろ何にしろずっとそのプロセスとして自分の始まりの記憶を追ってきた人なんだな。直島にも結局そのトンネルから海を見るっていう始まりの記憶を映画に引きつけてあれですけれども、ずっと辿ってきた人なんだなというのが、この映画の発見だったって感じですね。
In terms of the shrine that you were speaking about, that wasn't where he had his first memory. But in Odawara, where at the end of the film he's building the No stage and all of that ocean that he sees from that area, that's the ocean that he was seeing in his very first memory. So it's the same ocean, same horizon, and so that's why he chose that place, and that's why he kind of thought of that as his sort of final piece almost. And so that was kind of as a process. That's why we followed so much his first memory, because it felt a lot like him sort of going through the memories of his life.
What are you working on now, Nakamura-san? It sounded very interesting. Could you tell us a little bit about what you're doing now?
ちょっと子供を産んでから少し映像の方からは離れていて、この2年間ずっと文芸誌、文学の雑誌で2年間母親たち、結局母にならない人とか母にならないと決めている人、男の人も取材していったんですけども、まあ、テーマは母、マザリングっていうテーマでずっとインタビューをしてきていて、それをずっと連載してたんですね、2年間。それが来月、マザリングっていう本に、なります。本として書籍でとうとう販売するっていうことと、あと、実は久しぶりに今新作を撮っていて、これは映画ではなくて、アートピースとして、2月にインスタレーションとして展示をする作品なんですけれども、テーマは病気を持った病気の親を持つ子どもたちの視点ですね。その子どもたちに病の親と過ごす上で、どういうふうにこの家の中の状態が、さっきサスペンデッドっていう言葉で言いましたけど、実はタイトルサスペンデッドっていうんですけれども、宙づり感覚、病気の親との生活と自分の生の方にすごく触れた生活と、この病と死、死と生みたいなもののそのサスペンデッドな感覚、子供が持っているサスペンデッドな感覚を映像化するっていうアートピースを今作ってます。
So in terms of what I'm doing now, since giving birth to my child, I sort of took a hiatus, a bit of a break, but I've been publishing in a literature magazine on the theme of mothering. And I've done many interviews and basically published as a series about this, what I've discovered. And next month, that actually comes out as a book. So I'm very excited about that. And then right now, I hadn't shot anything for quite a while, but now I'm shooting something that is going to be released in February as an art piece. And this is about looking at basically parents with illnesses through a child's perspective. And the piece is called Suspended. And so it's kind of a portrait of the suspended world that a lot of those children live in, where, you know, there's kind of a suspension between, you know, living and death. And and there's that experience of living in that house. So turning that into a visual is something that I've been focusing on.
Okay, great, wonderful. We look forward to, well, seeing the book and hopefully learning more about this, I guess, art installation piece, maybe. Love to know more. Thank you so much. It's been such a pleasure. And now I think I will turn it, thank you.
Thank you very much.
I think I will turn it back to Kaifu-san with Japan House, LA, for some closing remarks. Thank you so much.
Thank you so much, Scarlet and Yuko-san. It was such an inspirational, fascinating dialogue that you had. Scarlet, I know that you are a professor of art and film history, and it makes sense because you navigated the dialogue so beautifully well. And Yuko Nakamura, we both have the same first name, but you're the talented one. And what amazed me is that you are not only talented filmmaker, producer, and director, but you have wonderful personality. And that's contributed to making this film so successful. The chemistry between you and Hiroshi Sugimoto was there. It's so inspirational to know. And because of the stories that both speakers shared tonight, it makes me feel that I want to see the film again. So if you, the viewers, haven't seen the film as yet, please make sure to go and see the film Hiroshi Sugimoto film up through December the 2nd. And also, I also like to encourage you to visit our Windology virtual tour online, and hopefully in the future, the actual exhibition at Halloween Highland Japan House. After you exit the program, you'll be redirected to our survey page. And please take a moment to fill out the form so that we can continue offering high quality programs in the areas of your interest. On Monday, December the 7th, we'll be presenting another webinar in relation to the Windology exhibition, which is entitled New Views, the Influence of Windows on Architecture and Society, featuring Igarashi Taro. He's the director of the Windology exhibition, and LA-based architect Yanai Takashi. So again, thank you so much for watching the program tonight, and we are looking forward to seeing you again soon. Thank you.